Tonight's shir is entitled What Really Happened at Sinai. What really happened on Shavuos. If you think about it, I guess people, when you ask them what Shavuos is about, they say, well, it's the day we got the Torah. But the Torah that we got on Shavuos, we don't have. We don't have that Torah. That Torah was smashed by Moshe Rabbeinu. The Torah we have today, we received on Yom Kippur. So if you think about it, that's a kind of strange celebration to celebrate something that really we don't really have. Maybe that's why Shavuos is called Zman Matan Torah Secho, the day of the giving the Torah, rather Zman Kabbalah's Torah Seinu, the day of receiving the Torah. The Torah that we have today is a Torah, arguably, on a lower level. The original Torah, the Luchos, were the Maaseh Elokim, God made the Luchos, and the writing was Hashem's. Both the material on which it was written and the writing were divine. The second Luchot were carved by Moshe Rabbeinu, and of course, therefore, they were on a lower level. Now, it could be argued that in some ways the second Luchot allowed the opportunity, the Beis Halevi has a beautiful essay on this, for the interface, for the partnership, if one can call that, of the Jewish people to be involved in Torah. That all of Torah Shebaal Peh is something we now have to work to bring out. And that's our job, and that's the work that we have to do. The first Luchot contained everything. Everything, all the written Torah, all the oral Torah. But let's get back to our question. That's question number one. What are we celebrating on, what are we really celebrating on Shavuot? What really happened at Sinai that makes it the fact that we have this celebration? And the point of fact, Shavuot, I think it's the Zohar says, is really the center of the Jewish year. It's the center of all the festivals. It's the epicenter of Judaism. The idea is that if you think about it, the closer to the center of something you are, the smaller something is until you get to a point at the middle, so to speak, of a circle, and that point occupies no space. We talked about this in connection with the dreidel at Chanukah, and Bezrat Hashem will say it again. Chanukah, when it should come, Ba'aleinu Latova. The closer you get to the center of something, the smaller things are. So if you look at the further something is, so to speak, from the center, the more it expands into time. The more it expands, and in this case, the more it expands into time. So, for example, Pesach is 7 days, and Sukkot is 7 days, with the 8th day of Shmini Atzeres. Shavuos is really only 1 day, and the only reason why it's 1 day is because you can't have a Chag which is less than 1 day. But conceptually, Shavuot is the center of time, the center of the creation. There's, Rashi says right at the beginning of the Torah, Yom HaShishi. Now, if you look at all the rest of the days of the week, let's leave aside Yom Rishon, that's Yom Echad. The first day was a whole different subject in itself. But all the other days of the week are Yom Sheni, Yom Shlishi, not Yom HaSheni. Of course, in English, to make it idiomatic, translators put in the definite article, the second day, the third day. But if you look at the original Hebrew, it says second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, but Yom HaShishi, the sixth day. And Rashi explains that the entire creation was held, so to speak, in abeyance, was hanging in the balance until the Jewish people said that Har Sinai Naaseh V'Nishma. At that point, the whole creation, so to speak, locks into place. The final piece in the jigsaw puzzle becomes whole. So in a sense, Shavuos is the day of creation, really, of creation becomes whole. The other question I wanted to ask, apart from the fact of what really happened at Sinai, if it really wasn't the day we received the Torah, as we said, because the Torah that we have now is really the Torah that we got on Yom Kippur, is 3 times it says that the shofar was blown at Har Sinai. What is the shofar doing at Sinai? Okay, there were trumpets there. One could say there was part of the... But maybe there's a different, maybe a deeper idea. Before we get into that, I want to bring us with one more question. And several places the Torah commands us never to forget what happened at Har Sinai. Several mitzvahs, aseh and lo aseh, there's a machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban, exactly where they are and what they are, but clearly everybody agrees there is a mitzvah, whether it's a lo aseh, an mitzvah aseh, or just an aseh, just a positive mitzvah, or it's also a negative mitzvah as well. Everybody agrees that we may not forget even one mitzvah given at Sinai, and the Ramban, it says that our eyes are supposed to be there, and our hearts are supposed to be there all of our lives. How are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to relive an event that we never attended? Are we not supposed to forget, we ourselves? The Ramban explains that because the Torah is transmitted to us as a personal experience, the truth of Sinai, I'm loosely translating, the truth of the Sinai experience will never be called into doubt, for had we received the Torah from Moshe alone, even though his prophecy may have been vindicated by signs and miracles, there would always be the possibility that some other prophet might use his own signs and wonders to contradict the Torah of Moshe. Doubt, says the Ramban, would then enter our hearts. However, because we heard the Torah directly from God, and our eyes saw at Sinai that there was no intermediary between the Almighty and us, so the lie would be given to any such false prophet, despite any miracle that he might manufacture. And it's for that reason, thus says the Ramban, that our eyes and our hearts must be constantly focused there. We are obliged to preserve the same level of clarity that we had when we stood at Sinai. Now, this is, as I said, a very difficult commandment to understand. How can we re-experience an event that we never attended? We're at best the recipients of a tradition which, however scrupulously validated, can never be equated with a first-hand experience. And yet it seems that the mitzvah demands of us that our eyes should be there, and we should never forget what happened to us at Sinai. Us. So the Ramban answers, and he says that it's axiomatic that we, quote, will not testify falsely to our children, nor will we bequeath to them something that's untrue. They, the children, will have no doubt whatsoever in the truth of our testimony to them. How does the Ramban answer the question? The Ramban seems to be saying that it's axiomatic that parents don't lie to their children about essential life information. That's true. Parents do not, they themselves could be duped, but a parent will not willingly lie to his children about essential life information. That's what he's saying. We'll bequeath to them something, we won't bequeath something that's not true. Great. But that seems to be a logical argument that Sinai is true because of this axiom that parents don't lie to their children about essential life information. But he doesn't seem to address the central issue. How can somebody who was never at an event believe with all the intensity of someone who saw it with his own eyes and ears, and heard it with his own ears, saw it with his own, and heard it with his own ears? So we've got three questions. Question number one, what are we celebrating? It's not the celebration of the receiving of the Torah. We lost that Torah. Question number two, what's the shofar doing at Har Sinai, apart from being part of the general panoply, the sounds and the light, the kolos, and why specifically the shofar? And our third question, that the Torah commands us to have this constant awareness of our experience of being at Sinai, where we weren't ever there. And the Ramban doesn't really seem to be helping us but we'll see. The Mishnah in Avot begins with the words, Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai, u'masol Yoshua v'Yoshua l'zekenu, etc., etc. Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. Now, it's a very, if you think about it, a rather strange way to put it. Moshe received the Torah at Sinai. Moshe received the Torah from God. But Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai, Moshe got the Torah from a mountain. He didn't get the Torah from a mountain. So the Maharal says that what this means is Moshe kibel something called Torah mi Sinai. There was an existential experience at Sinai which altered the perception, our fundamental perception of how we look at the world. Let me try and explain. Torah received something called Torah mi Sinai, and that experience altered each person's awareness of himself and of existence itself. How was man created? Let's talk about the shofar. Vayipach ba'apov nishmas chayim, vayihi ha'odam lenefesh chaya. And Hashem breathed into the nostrils, into his nostrils, the soul of life, and man became a nefesh chaya, a living spirit. The Targum of nefesh chaya is ruach mamalala, which means a speaking spirit. The essence of life is speech. Life is placed into us as a function of speech, or speech is a function of life itself, maybe even better. Speech contains within it, quite literally, the breath of life. And when we blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, essentially, that speaking spirit, we are returning that to Hashem. That speaking spirit is giving an account of itself. The same vayipach that Hashem blew into our nostrils, we return to Him through our blowing of the shofar. And the air of our lungs returns the spirit, the ruach mamalala returns that nefesh chaya to Hashem, and with that shofar, that's what we stand in judgment with. That really expresses what we've done with our lives. Hashem gave us this nishmas chayim, and we express back to Him what we've done with that. And what is that speaking spirit that we're supposed to return to Him? What is that spirit supposed to say? And just maybe parenthetically, we should add that the deepest secret of Rosh Hashanah, that thing that not so to speak, quite literally, the Gemara tells us, makes Hashem arise from the throne of din, of strict judgment, and sit on the throne of rachamim, of mercy, is the shofar. What is it about the shofar that converts din into rachamim? And what is it that speaking spirit is supposed to say? It says in Tehillim Perek Tzadi Beis, Pasuk Gimel, Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos, Lahagid ba'boker chasdecho ve'emunosecha ba'leilos. Lahagid, to speak. Ba'boker, in the morning, chasdecho, your kindnesses, Hashem, ve'emunosecha, and your faithfulness, ba'leilos, in the nights. So there seem to be two kinds of speech here. There's the speech of the day and the speech of the morning, ba'boker chasdecho, and there's emunah, which is faithfulness at night. Emunah is connected to the night. There are two kinds of speech. There's the speech of the morning and the speech of the night, and there are really two kinds of speech in a different way. Almost all speech that we know of is related to a system of ideas, expression of concepts, expression of the intellect. It's something that we can share. We can argue about these. The speech that we're talking about exists as a common system of discussion. These are things which are outside ourselves. That's, so to speak, the world as we perceive it, the chesed of Hashem, the existence of things that we can talk about. We can share. This is a hat. This is a marker. This table is a good table. No, it's not. It's not a good table. All of these, that chain, that system of speech is connected with exterior objects. It's something which exists in the bokeh, in the light, and we can look at it and we can describe it and we can synthesize, we can agree, we can disagree, we can make mistakes in this system of language. But in essence, there is the potential with the lahagid babokeh chastecha, or that kind of language, the ability to build a shared common reality, a shared reality. And that's sufficient for the settlement and the development of the world. That is lahagid babokeh chastecha. But there's another speech. Ve'munasacha ba'leilos. There's a speech of the night. In the night, true night, nothing is visible. If you've ever been out in, say, the desert on a starless night, nowadays we've managed to basically kill the night. The night is basically like a sort of darker kind of day. But true night, if you've ever been in complete blackness, it's a very unique kind of feeling. It reminds me actually of, I don't think it's quite the same thing, but in the 50s, I think, or 60s, they wanted to do experiments of sensory deprivation. And they put some hapless volunteer into this wetsuit and they immersed him in water at blood temperature, and they basically tried to remove all of any outside sensory stimulation. The word in Hebrew for darkness is choshech. Choshech is connected to the word meaning to withhold. As it says in the Pasuk by Yitzhak Avinu, V'lo, Hashem says to Abraham about Yitzhak, V'lo chasachta es bincha es yichidecha. You have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Lo chasachta. Chasachta is the same root as choshech. True darkness is the withholding of everything, except the very identity, the very sense of our own existence. And that is the lagid babokeh chastecha v'emunasacha b'leilos, the emuna of the night. As we said, most of speech is to do with common ideas, the sharing, chastecha babokeh. But there's another speech, the speech of the night. There's a perception, there is a language. Let's start first with the perception. There is one perception in a person that is very deep. It's deeper than any idea. It doesn't work through a system of ideas. It's deeper than the system of ideas. It's stronger than the system of ideas. It's a perception that is totally impossible to communicate to anybody else. It cannot be shared, discussed, argued or proved, and that is the perception of I. The fact, the truth of my own existence is something as the deepest knowledge that I have. The fact of my own I, the fact of my own existence is not something that I arrive at through an intellectual conversation with myself. Do I exist? Yes, I'm here. It's not something anybody can argue. Nobody can argue with me that I'm not here. We're not playing like sort of college games, well, maybe we're not here, maybe the whole thing is like a big dream. Nobody really lives like that. It reminds me of the story they tell about, there's this murderer who was about to be sentenced by the judge. And the judge says to him, would you like to say anything? So he says, Judge, you and everything in this courtroom are figments of my imagination. So the judge says, fine. We're sentencing you to the imaginary electric chair. Nobody lives like that. Everybody is 100% certain of the fact that they exist. Nobody can convince me I don't exist. And yet I can't prove it to anybody. And a person's sense of his own sense of his existence is totally incommunicable to anybody else. My sense of my own existence with regard to myself is something completely personal, and just as yours is, and yours is, it's nothing. It's something we can't share. It's the deepest feeling, and that is the emunos chabaleilos. That is the emuna of the night. That is the speech of the night, and that is the speech of the shofar, which, if you think about it, is beyond words. It's a language which is beyond speech. What Hashem wants from us, what we express in the shofar, is our emuna, and emuna is something that takes place in the night, when everything else is removed from a person. The shofar is the expression of the deepest part of ourselves, incommunicable through words. That's the expression of the speaking spirit, the ruach mamalala, of the nefesh chaim, nefesh chaya, and it's not transferable through words. Hashem gives us a tool. It's called the shofar, and that allows us to express this deepest of our perceptions, which is the expression of the self with regard to itself. And that's what it means when the Torah says, we will hear the shofar and we will stand in din. What is this deepest sense, the deepest truth that I know beyond intellect of my own existence? What has this got to do with Sinai? What has this got to do? What is the shofar, which is what we're talking about now? What's that got to do with what happened at Har Sinai? Let's try and understand.
From what I remember, I think we do not play the shofar in the night, which is quite interesting because we are saying it's like this speech of the night. But from what I think we do not play it in the night.
No, you can't blow the shofar at night. The shofar has to be blown during the day. Can we come back to that?
Yes.
Let's go back to the creation of man. Man was created by the pronouncement, Naaseh Adam, let us make man. At Sinai, however, the Gemara tells us that when Hashem said, I am Hashem, your God, the Jewish people, the life force of the entire Jewish people left their bodies. Quite simply, the entire Jewish people died. Gemara says in Shabbos Daf Peiches Amud Beis, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kol dibur v'dibur sheyotz mepi HaKadosh Baruch Hu yotzasa nishmosan shel Yisrael. With each and every word that Hashem, that emerged, that came from the mouth Kaviyochel of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the souls of the Jewish people left their bodies. Shneimar says in Shir Hashirim, Hey, nafshi yotza b'diburo. My soul left with his word. Says the Gemara, Uma'ache shem dibur rishon yotza nishmosan dibur sheni heich kiblu. Says the Gemara, so if you're telling me that with the first dibur, their souls left their bodies, so how was it then that they were able to accept the second dibur? The second of the Sarasit Dibros. When we say the Dibur, we mean each statement, not each word. So the answer is Horid Tal Sha'osid Lechayos Boy Mesim. Hashem sent down the Tal, which is when the second bracha of Shemona Esrei we talk about the rain, because the Tal, the dew, will be used for Tichias HaMesim. And of course that's the second bracha, which is to do with Yitzhak Avinu, which is Tichias HaMesim. That Yitzhak Avinu, so to speak, lived a life. Okay, there's many medrashim about that, but the point I want to get to here is that Hashem sent down the Tal, which was going to be used for the revival of the dead, V'hachi osam, and he brought them back to life. Shnei Amaz says in Tehillim, Samaches, Geshem, Nedovos, Tonif, Elokim, Nachlosecha, Na'ale, Ato, Konanto. So what happened at Sinai? What happened at Sinai basically was as we know, the Zohar Kodesh says, Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. Everything in this world has to have a source in the Torah for it to be able to exist. Hashem looked into the Torah, ubara alma. So, what allowed man to exist was the pasuk in the Torah, Naaseh Adam. Man's ability to exist was powered, so to speak, spiritually by that verse in the Torah. At Sinai, when their souls left their body and they were brought back to life, what brought them back to life was not the same Naaseh Adam. What brought them back to life was Ani Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim Mibeis Avadim. I am Hashem your God. That is what now powered the Jewish people. That is what gave them life. They weren't anymore being spiritually powered by Naaseh Adam. The Gemara says also in Shabbos Daf Kuf Hey Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yochanan says, Anochi, when it says at the beginning, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Anochi is a notricon, I always forget this word in English. When you take the first letter of a sentence, you make a word out of it. I forgot the word in English. Okay, but it's we know the word in, I guess, a notricon sounds like a Greek word. What it means is, Anochi means it's a word made up from 4 words. Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud. Anochi says, acronym, thank you, an acronym. It's an acronym, and it stands for, Anochi stands for, Ana, I, Nafshi, myself, says Hashem speaking, Kesivas, have written, Yahavis, and given. I, myself, have written and given. Meaning, Hashem says, I have, kavayochel, so to speak, taken myself and I've written it myself into the Torah and I've given it over. Which means that the deepest sense of our own existence, which was once powered by Naaseh Adam, now is powered by something completely different. That our sense of our identity, the deepest sense of who we are, becomes indivisible, becomes the same thing. Hainu hach, with a knowledge of Hashem. This is the root of all emunah. Emunah is not something intellectual. We are the children of the children, and that's what the Ramban means. That's something which is incontrovertible. We will have no doubt, and we can re-experience Sinai. And we do re-experience every Shavuos, because what powered us from Sinai onwards was Anochi, Ana Nafshis, Kesivus Yahavis. Hashem put himself into the Torah, meaning that deeper sense that we spoke about before, that emunoscha baleilos, the emuna, real emuna, is powered by the fact that Hashem put into us at Sinai a knowledge of, the knowledge of Hashem's existence becomes synonymous with the deepest knowledge of our own existence. This is what emuna is. Emuna is not something intellectual. Emuna is not something, as the Ramban says, that a person is not prepared to be moisa nefesh, to give up his life for something which is intellectual. Why? Because the person always knows, well, maybe I made a mistake in my calculations. Intellect is always open to question. And not only that, people ask you for a 2 plus 2 proof that God exists. The Torah is true. It's not that there aren't those proofs, it's that they cannot be. And the reason why is the Torah itself says, Uvacharta b'chaim, choose life. Choose life means choice always implies that you always have the ability to make the wrong choice. Choose life means there has to be, on the intellectual level anyway, the ability to choose the wrong thing. It's not that proofs don't exist, it's by definition they can't exist. Because the Torah itself says you have to choose. However, Hashem put inside us something which is deeper than intellect. It's that deepest knowledge of our own existence that we spoke about. That knowledge which is beyond any kind of argument or conversation. The surety, the knowledge, the more than knowledge, there's not even a word for it. I know I exist. And the deepest knowledge of my own existence becomes synonymous at Sinai with the knowledge of the existence of Hashem. That's what was received at Sinai, a new and higher perception of self, a redefinition of I. And that existential clarity is called Torah Misinai. Moshe Kibel, Torah Misinai. The Torah, Hashem wrote himself. He says, I myself have written and put myself into the Torah. When he gave us the Torah, what brought our bodies back to life inside us was a neshama powered by a different pasuk in the Torah, Anochi. Gemara in Sukkah says, describes the great rejoicing of the Simchas Beis HaShveva. Gemara says in Sukkah Daf Nun Gimel Amud Aleph, Tanya, Amru alav al Hillel HaZoken. They said about Hillel HaZoken, K'shahar Samach b'Simchas Beis HaShveva, when he was rejoicing at the Simchas Beis HaShveva, Ama Chein, he said thus, Im ani kan, if I am here, Hakol kan, everything is here. Ve'im eini kan, and if I'm not here, mi kan, who is here? Now, on the surface of this looks like a rather strange statement for Hillel to make, that if he's here, everything's here, and if he's not here, nothing's here. But if you remember, there's another way. Ani, Anochi, is Hashem's name. Ona Hashem, Hoshia Na, Ona, Ani. Ani is one of God's names. Anochi, Ona, Nashi. I myself have put myself into the Torah. Hillel was talking about Hashem. If Hashem is here, everything is here. And if Hashem is not here, nothing is here. The Simchas Beis HaShveva was a ceremony where water which was drawn up from the spring of Gichon was poured on the altar. Now, on a deeper level, Tosfos says that what was drawn up through this celebration was ruchnius, was spirituality, from the depths of one's being. The nature of true spirituality, and this is what went on here, is to draw up, is when the connection of my sense of existence, my I, becomes connected to the source of all existence. The absolute reality which was revealed at Sinai to the Jewish people is that Hashem is the I, capital I, of the world. And just as no one doubts the existence of his or her own I, so at Sinai, no one doubted the existence of Hashem. And that's what the Ramban means when he says, as parents, we will not bequeath to our children something that's untrue. They will have no doubt whatsoever in the truth of our testimony to them because it's in their genes. We pass down to our children the inevitability, the truth of Sinai. And that's what it means when we say, Uma chelek eloka mimal. That inside us is a chelek eloka mimal, a part of God from above. And that is the Ruach Mamalala, that's the speaking spirit, which speaks of the deepest part of ourselves, which has become synonymous with the knowledge of the existence of God. Let's try and sum up. What we're trying to advance here is the idea that what happened at Sinai was not so much the giving of the Torah, and of course it was. I'm not saying that's not significant. But I want to say that the actual significance of the giving of the Torah, seeing as that's not the Torah we have today, it's a strange day for us to celebrate. We should really be celebrating Shavuos on Yom Kippur, the day we got the Torah. So what I wanted to suggest is that what really happened at Shavuos was the Jewish people were given a sense of identity which became inseparable from emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what we pass down to our children. That's the Ruach Mamalala, that's the voice of the shofar, that's the emunah baleilos. The emunah, the belief in Hashem, becomes synonymous with the certain knowledge of my own existence. And that my I, is no more than just one of Hashem's expressions of His I in the world. Every day we say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Sforim say that when a person says Echad, he should think for a split second, Ein od milvado, nothing exists except for Him, for Hashem. Echad, Aleph, Chet, Dalad, 1, the 7 Rekios, the 7 heavens in this world in the 4 directions. Echad, Ein od milvado, nothing exists except Hashem. Now, 1 second. If I'm doing that, then who actually is saying this Kriya Shema right now? And the answer is that split second, and you're only allowed to do it for a split second. As the Sforim say, you have to rotza v'shav. You run to this point of ein od milvado, that nothing else exists except for Hashem. And who am I? My I is no more than one of Hashem's expressions of His capital I in the world. That is emunah. That's the moment of faith. That's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And my deepest sense of my own existence, I surrender to His Echad. My Echad. Because if you think about it, it's very easy to go through life and so many people believing that, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Ani Echad. I mean, I know I'm here. I'm not sure about you guys. Maybe you're just this vast, super duper IMAX presentation. Kagito ergo sum. I know I exist. A Jew takes that certainty of his own existence and he surrenders it to Hashem. A person instinctively knows that he's eternal. The soul knows that it will live forever. A person knows he's come from somewhere and he's going to go to somewhere else. That's what I believe we got at Sinai. That's what really happened at Sinai, was a redefinition of the deeper sense of our own identity. Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us in the night of Shavuos, that we should open our hearts and be aware of this tremendous gift that Hashem gave us on Shavuos. Honor, Nashi, Ksavas, Yahavis. Hashem, so to speak, wrote Himself into the Torah and He gave it to us, and He gives it to us again every Shavuos. That deeper sense of my own identity is synonymous with just one aspect of Hashem expressing Himself in His world. And when we say twice a day, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that when we surrender to Ein od milvado, that nothing exists except Hashem, that sense that, hang on a second, I really exist. No, I'm swallowed up in Hashem's I. This is true emunah. This is true emunah.